The Book of Exodus, a timeless tale, a cornerstone of faith. It tells the story of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt, their journey from slavery to freedom, led by a prophet chosen by God, Moses. Exodus is a testament to faith, a reminder of God's power. It speaks of liberation and the fight for justice. Within this book we find tales of miracles and plagues, stories that have echoed through generations, inspiring awe and reflection. Each chapter unveils a piece of the puzzle, a step towards understanding the divine plan. In this video we delve into Exodus chapter 8 and 9. Welcome to Bible Stories and Chronicles channel. If you like to hear beautiful stories from Bible, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you. Imagine Egypt, a land of pharaohs and pyramids, a mighty empire built on the backs of slaves. Among them, the Israelites toiled, their cries for freedom ignored. For generations they endured hardship, their faith tested, their hope dwindling, but their plight did not go unnoticed. A deliverer emerged from the Nile, Moses, chosen by God to confront Pharaoh, to demand the Israelites' release. Moses stood before the king, the weight of his people on his shoulders. He delivered God's message, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He refused to acknowledge God's power, and so began a battle of wills, a clash between the divine and the earthly. Plague after plague would descend upon Egypt, each one a test of Pharaoh's resolve, and a demonstration of God's unwavering might. Join us as we journey into the heart of Exodus chapter 8 and 9, where plagues are unleashed and a nation's fate hangs in the balance. The first plague, a river of blood. Exodus chapter 8 opens with a scene of defiance. Pharaoh, consumed by pride, remained unmoved by Moses' pleas. He refused to release the Israelites from their bondage. The Nile, Egypt's lifeline, flowed serenely, unaware of the impending chaos. God, through Moses, unleashed the first plague. The waters of the Nile transformed. The lifeblood of Egypt turned to blood. Fish perished. The stench of death filled the air. The Egyptians recoiled in horror. Their precious river, a source of life and sustenance, had become a source of death and despair. Pharaoh, however, remained unyielding, his heart hardened against the suffering of his people. He attributed the plague to magic. He refused to acknowledge the power of God. His defiance fueled the flames of divine wrath, setting the stage for a series of even more devastating plagues. The second plague, an army of frogs. The second plague arrived with a vengeance. An army of frogs emerged from the Nile. They swarmed the land, a living, croaking tide. Homes were invaded, kitchens overrun. The stench of frogs permeated every corner of Egypt. Sleep became impossible. Every surface, every space teeming with amphibians. Pharaoh in his palace was not spared. The frogs infiltrated his chambers, a constant reminder of his defiance. The Egyptians, desperate for relief, pleaded with Pharaoh to relent. They recognized the hand of God in this plague, but Pharaoh, blinded by pride, clung to his power. He refused to release the Israelites. The relentless assault of the frogs finally broke Pharaoh's resolve, at least for a moment. He summoned Moses and Aaron. He promised to release the Israelites if only the plague would end. His words, however, rang hollow. They were driven by desperation, not genuine repentance. Moses, guided by God, agreed to Pharaoh's request. He stretched out his hand and the frogs vanished. The land, once teeming with amphibians, fell silent. The stench of decay lingered, a reminder of the plague's devastation. Pharaoh, relieved, breathed a sigh of freedom, but his relief was short-lived. The Nile's waters receded, the stench of frogs dissipated, a semblance of normality returned to Egypt, yet a shadow of unease lingered. Pharaoh, true to his nature, reneged on his promise. He hardened his heart against the plight of the Israelites. God, witnessing Pharaoh's treachery, unleashed the third plague. This time the target was not water, but earth. A cloud of gnats, thick and relentless, descended upon Egypt. They swarmed through the streets, a buzzing, biting menace. The Egyptians coughed and swatted, their bodies covered in itchy bites. The gnats infiltrated their homes, their food, their very breath. Even Pharaoh's magicians, who had mimicked the previous plagues, were powerless against this infestation. They confessed to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." Their words, however, fell on deaf ears. Pharaoh, stubborn and proud, refused to heed the warning. he clung to his power, his heart hardened against the suffering that engulfed his nation. The gnats, a relentless torment, finally subsided. But Egypt's respite was short-lived. God, in his righteous anger, unleashed the fourth plague. This time, the assault was targeted. While the previous plagues had affected all of Egypt, this one spared the land of Goshen, where the Israelites resided. Swarms of flies, black and buzzing, descended upon Egypt. They filled the air, a living buzzing plague. Homes, streets, and palaces were overrun. The flies crawled on food, making it inedible. They buzzed incessantly, a maddening drone that tormented the Egyptians. The stench of decay as the flies died permeated the air. Life in Egypt, once vibrant and prosperous, had become a nightmare. Pharaoh, witnessing the devastation, his palace overrun by flies, felt a flicker of fear. He sent for Moses and Aaron, a glimmer of hope in his voice. Pharaoh, desperate for relief, offered a concession. He would allow the Israelites to sacrifice to their God, but they must do so within Egypt. Moses, however, knew this was not God's will. The Israelites were to worship freely, not under Pharaoh's watchful eye. Moses insisted, "We must go into the wilderness 3 days' journey and sacrifice to the Lord our God." Pharaoh, incensed by Moses' defiance, bargained. "Go, but not so far away," he pleaded, "and entreat for me." His words, though a concession, still reeked of control. He sought to limit the Israelites' freedom, to keep them tethered to Egypt. Moses, guided by God, agreed to Pharaoh's limited request. He stretched out his hand and the swarms of flies vanished. Yet Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. He had witnessed the power of God, felt the sting of his wrath, yet he clung to his pride, unwilling to fully submit to the divine will. The oppressive presence of the flies dissipated, leaving behind an eerie silence. The Egyptians, exhausted and tormented, breathed a collective sigh of relief. Pharaoh, observing the respite, felt a flicker of hope. He saw an opportunity to exploit the situation, to maintain his grip on power. He summoned Moses and Aaron, their presence a constant reminder of his predicament. "Very well," he conceded, his voice laced with reluctance. "You may go and sacrifice to the Lord your God. But," he added quickly, "you must not go very far away." His words were a carefully crafted compromise, designed to appease both his pride and the wrath he had witnessed. He reasoned that if the Israelites remained within his reach, he could control their movements, limit their freedom. He still believed himself to be the ultimate authority, the divine ruler of Egypt. He underestimated the power he was dealing with, the unwavering resolve of both God and Moses. Moses, guided by God's wisdom, saw through Pharaoh's deception. He knew that true freedom could not be achieved under the shadow of oppression, yet he agreed to Pharaoh's limited request, for he understood the intricate dance between punishment and redemption. He stretched out his hand and the land of Egypt was cleansed of the flies. The relief, however, was short-lived. Pharaoh, true to his nature, reneged on his promise. He refused to release the Israelites, his heart hardened against the suffering he had witnessed. And so, the cycle continued. God, in his righteous anger, unleashed the fifth plague, this time targeting the livestock of Egypt. A deadly pestilence swept through the land, striking down horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, and sheep. The air filled with the stench of death, a grim reminder of Pharaoh's stubbornness. The cries of the Egyptians, mourning the loss of their animals, echoed through the streets. Still, Pharaoh's heart remained unmoved. He clung to his pride, his grip on power, refusing to acknowledge the hand of God in this latest calamity. The stench of death lingered in the air, a grim testament to the devastating power of the pestilence. Pharaoh, though shaken by the magnitude of the plague, remained defiant. He sought a way out, a loophole that would appease the Israelites' God without compromising his own authority. He summoned Moses and Aaron, their presence a constant reminder of his own vulnerability. "Go," he conceded, his voice laced with a calculated generosity. "Go and sacrifice to the Lord your God, but," he added quickly, "leave your flocks and your herds behind." He believed that by holding the Israelites' livestock hostage, he could ensure their return, maintain his grip on their fate. Moses, however, saw through his deception. He knew that Pharaoh sought to divide the Israelites, to weaken their resolve by separating them from their possessions. The cycle continued, a relentless dance between divine punishment and Pharaoh's stubborn refusal to acknowledge the true God. Each plague, a devastating blow, yet each one met with the same unwavering defiance. The air hung heavy with the stench of death, a stark reminder of the plague's devastation. Yet, amidst the despair, Moses stood firm, a beacon of hope against the backdrop of Pharaoh's tyranny. He met the king's gaze with unwavering resolve, his voice echoing with the authority of the divine. "We will not leave a single hoof behind," Moses declared, his words echoing through the Pharaoh's opulent chambers. "We must choose from our livestock to sacrifice to the Lord our God, and we will not know what we must offer until we arrive." Pharaoh, accustomed to unquestioning obedience, recoiled at this brazen defiance. His anger ignited, fueled by the humiliation of having his authority challenged. "Get out of my sight!" he roared, his voice trembling with rage. "Do not let me see your face again, for on the day you see my face you shall die!" Moses, undeterred by Pharaoh's empty threats, turned and left the palace. He carried with him the weight of his people's suffering, their hopes and fears resting on his shoulders. As he stepped out into the sunlight, the full force of God's wrath descended upon Egypt. The sixth plague, more personal and agonizing than those before, targeted the Egyptians themselves. Painful, festering boils erupted on the skin of men and animals alike, a torment that spared no one, not even the Pharaoh's magicians who had once mocked God's power. The air filled with the groans of the afflicted, a chorus of suffering that echoed through the once proud nation. The Egyptians, accustomed to viewing their bodies as sacred, were humbled by this debilitating plague. Even Pharaoh, shielded within his palace walls, could not escape the agony that gripped his people. The cries of his people, a constant reminder of his own impotence against the God of Israel, gnawed at Pharaoh's resolve. Yet pride, like a venomous serpent, coiled around his heart, poisoning his thoughts, urging him to remain defiant. He summoned Moses once more, his voice a strained whisper, his arrogance tempered by a flicker of fear. "Go," he rasped, the words catching in his throat. "Go, serve the Lord your God. Only let this death depart from me." His plea, however, rang hollow, devoid of genuine repentance. He sought only to alleviate his own suffering, to preserve his own power while remaining blind to the plight of those he ruled. Moses, sensing the emptiness behind Pharaoh's words, knew that his heart remained hardened, his spirit untouched by true remorse. As the plague abated, leaving behind a trail of suffering and despair, the cycle continued, a relentless dance between divine judgment and human obstinacy. A heavy silence descended upon Egypt, a stark contrast to the groans of pain that had recently filled the air. The boils had receded, leaving behind scars both physical and psychological, a reminder of the god's power and Pharaoh's folly. Yet, amidst the eerie calm, a sense of foreboding lingered. The sky, once a brilliant blue, darkened ominously, heavy with the threat of an impending storm unlike any Egypt had ever seen. Moses, his face etched with a mixture of sorrow and resolve, raised his staff towards the heavens, his silhouette a stark reminder of the divine power he wielded. And then it struck. Hailstones larger and fiercer than any previously witnessed rained down upon the land, each one a missile of ice and fury. Lightning like fiery serpents danced across the sky, striking down trees, igniting fields, and setting fire to anything in its path. The air crackled with energy, a symphony of destruction orchestrated by the hand of the Almighty. The Egyptians, caught off guard by the ferocity of the storm, scrambled for shelter, their cries of terror swallowed by the roar of thunder and the relentless pounding of hail. Crops were obliterated, livestock decimated, and homes reduced to rubble, the fruits of their labor swept away in an instant. Even Pharaoh, shielded within his opulent palace, could not escape the fury of the storm. The hail crashed through his windows, extinguishing his lamps and plunging his grand chambers into darkness. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced his heart for the first time. He summoned Moses and Aaron, their arrival a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. "This time, I have sinned," he confessed, his voice trembling, his usual arrogance replaced by a desperate plea for mercy. "The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. Entreat the Lord, for it is enough." Let there be no more mighty thunderings and hail, and I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer. His words, though laced with fear, held a glimmer of repentance, a recognition of the God he had so long defied. Moses, his heart moved by Pharaoh's apparent change of heart, raised his hands in prayer, his voice a soothing balm against the storm's fury. As if on cue, the hail ceased, the lightning subsided, and the sky slowly began to clear. A fragile hope blossomed in the hearts of the Israelites, a hope that their long ordeal was finally coming to an end. But Pharaoh, his pride wounded, his heart still tainted by a lust for power, watched the departing figures of Moses and Aaron, a calculating glint returning to his eyes. He had bought himself time, a reprieve from the wrath of the heavens, but his promise, like those before, would prove to be as fleeting as the storm itself. Exodus chapter 8 and 9. A tapestry of power, defiance, and divine intervention. Moses, a conduit of God's will, and Pharaoh, clinging to earthly control. Plagues rained down upon Egypt. Frogs, gnats, flies, pestilence, boils, hail, and fire. Chaos orchestrated by God. A message emerges, clear and resonant. The plagues were not arbitrary. They were pleas for recognition, opportunities for repentance. But Pharaoh, blinded by pride, failed. Each plague hardened his heart. His remorse was hollow. Exodus chapter 8 and 9 are a reminder. Earthly power is fleeting. Ignoring the oppressed has consequences. Choose humility, empathy, and faith. We will continue with another beautiful story from Bible in our next video. Subscribe so that you will not miss it. Thanks for watching.